I would like to take a moment before we get into today's main episode and to talk about my sponsor for the podcast. Podmatch is a new podcasting site dedicated to all podcasters. The platform helps hosts get connected with potential guests to appear on their show, as well as allow guests to find podcasts that will give them a chance to share their story. Podmatch offers many tools to help organize your page, from to-do lists to episode planning to potentially appearing on a leaderboard. Podmatch has it all. The best part, you have the potential to get paid. And who doesn't like to get paid from home? I like to. With an easy sign up, you can start connecting with podcasters and guests immediately. I have been a part of Podmatch since the beginning of May, and I have got to say that it was the best decision I've ever made because Podmatch helps your podcast grow. It helps you get connected with people that have very interesting, very compelling background stories that are just waiting for their story to be shared. So if you are a host or guest and would like to start building professional relationships, explore more opportunities, and have your story shared, I highly suggest that you sign up with Podmatch today by going to joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to start expanding your network in seconds. I would like to give another huge thank you to Podmatch for sponsoring this episode. Now on to our main episode, and again, you can sign up at joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to begin your podcasting journey today. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Lethal Venom podcast. This is a show where I talk about anything I want with the honest to God truth, no lies told. Today, I have Miss Susan Snow. Susan has a very impactful story about her father. Her father was LAPD Detective Thomas C. Williams, who was sadly ambushed and killed on Halloween night of 1985 when she was only 17. Now, she is a published author, speaker, and coach, and she also now lives as a realtor in the Denver metro area. So she's going to join us today and tell us a little bit about her story and just a little bit of how she's thrived and survived since then and how she's overcome um, the trauma of that. So I want to welcome Susan to the show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So I kind of mentioned it a little bit about your story, but just tell me a little bit more about yourself and what you do.
Sure. Well, you said that I am a realtor. I am, but I am actually moving into the coaching world. I am a trauma resiliency coach based on my journey and realizing that that was actually my purpose is to help others who have done some work in healing from trauma but feel stuck. So that's where I come into play. I am a mom of three adult children that I won't discuss their ages. But yeah, I currently live in Colorado. I'm residing in Colorado and um, wrote my book. It was published in 2023, and it took me 4.5 years to write it. And I'll tell you why.
So tell me a little bit about childhood and just your relationship with your father growing up.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I was a pretty lucky girl. I had a dad that was a very present person. So no matter who you were in his life, he always, if he was in conversation with you, he always made you feel like you were the most important person in that room. And I loved that about him. So I always had a safe space with my dad. Um, he was my security. He was he was just a beautiful human being, and I was blessed to be his daughter. Um, I also grew up in a household where I had a mother that was not as present. um, and so my dad and I had a very um, big bond in the fact that he was always my voice of reason. I know daughters and mothers go at it, they battle, but our relationship was a little bit more intense at times. So my dad was always the one that was my voice of reason. And the go-between, so to speak. Other than that, growing up with a dad that was a cop, um, when I was young, he was a street cop. And at that point, I thought, there was a chance that dad could get hurt on the job since he's out there. Death never came to my mind because I was too young. But as I got older and I became, older and understanding of the job a little bit more, he had became a detective. And when he became a detective, I had this false sense of security that he had a desk job now. He was a robbery homicide detective and he came in after the fact. So because of that, I just felt like he couldn't get hurt because, unless he got a paper cut at his desk or something, it was not imminent danger in my mind. And unfortunately, that all stopped. That all ended on Halloween night of 1985. Like you said, I was 17 at the time, normal teenager. It was Halloween, so I wanted to go to a party with some friends and my boyfriend at the time. And I had a conversation with my dad as he was getting ready to go and testify in court in a case that he was the lead detective on. And during that conversation, I was asking him about the party and if I could go. And he said no, it was a school night and he didn't want me out. So I left for school kind of frustrated, but I concocted an idea that when dad came home, I would have cleaned the entire house and, I was going to schmooze my parents to let me go to this party. So the plan was he was going to leave court, go pick up my 6-year-old brother from school, and then come home. And as I was getting ready for this party in hopes to go, my mom was there and the phone rang. And as soon as the phone rang, I thought it was going to be for me. Who's going to call my parents, right? So I went and I picked up the phone, and it was a lady from my brother's school. And all she said was that there was a drive-by shooting and my dad was involved. No other information. My mom came around the corner. I handed her the phone as fast as I could. And I tried to listen in, but I couldn't hear anything. But I watched her body language and it just told me the whole story. It told me that things were not good. She got off the phone. She looked at me and said, "We're going to the school." So we got in the car and drove the 7 minutes to the church school where my brother attended. And it was nighttime. This was after 5 o'clock, so it was pretty dark outside. And the kids in after school care got out on the back side of the school. So when we got there, there was a parking lot in the middle of the school. So we parked there and started heading towards the back of the school. Even though it was dark out, the back side of the school looked like it was daylight because there were so many police car lights that were blaring. And there was an ambulance that was in the street as well. And we kept walking. We glanced over and saw my dad's truck. So we started to run towards the truck. The closer we got to the truck, we saw glass on the ground. And as we rounded the corner, there he was, partially covered up. I watched my mom collapse and start screaming. I stood in that street just completely frozen. I didn't know what I was seeing. Like it was not comprehending in my mind. So I hyper focused on the ambulance in the street. And my mind kept saying, why isn't anyone helping him? Where is everyone? Why isn't anybody helping him? A little bit after that thought, I had two officers that came over and grabbed our arms and escorted us back into the school, into an office. And my mom was escorted away by two detectives. At this point, I had no conversations about where my brother was. I had no information. I didn't know if he was hurt. I didn't know where he was. I didn't know any information at all. And as a teenager, I was just sitting there trying to comprehend the entire the chaos that was going on around me and still trying to comprehend what I saw in my mind or what I didn't see in my mind. And I heard two ladies that worked in the office speaking to each other, and the one lady said that my dad was deceased. And in that moment, it was when my world cracked, when I heard those words. And I wanted to get up out of that chair and run out of that room as far from the situation as I could. But unfortunately, my body felt like it was filled with cement and I couldn't move. And my mom came into the room a little bit later and she said, I'm sending you with a neighbor. And I know that I wanted to run out of there, but there was the kid part of me that was like, I need to be with my family. I can't navigate this by myself. I don't know what to do. And I need my brother and I need my mom, but unfortunately I didn't get that. I did get sent with the neighbor. And when we got to our neighborhood, I realized that my quiet neighborhood was absolutely filled with law enforcement. Um, there were police cars everywhere, helicopters above. And it was a huge story. So, of course, the media started to ascend in our neighborhood. And my neighbor had known me since I was a little girl. I was friends with their daughter. And so she knew my parents for many, many years. And even as a grown adult, she was trying to comprehend everything and navigate through everything that was going on and all the chaos in our neighborhood and everything. And then on top of that, she has his teenage daughter who is completely inconsolable at that point. Um, I had begged her to call my boyfriend, who had only been dating 3 months at the time. He was 19. And I begged her to call him at work and have him come be with me. So she did, but unfortunately, when she called him, she didn't give him a lot of information. So when he showed up to the door in a normal fashion, he said, grab your purse, grab your jacket. What hospital is he at? Let's go. And I couldn't spit the words out. And the more persistent he got about leaving, I finally blurted it out. He's gone. And he said, what do you mean he's gone? And I said, he's gone. He's not at a hospital. And I watched him collapse and start to sob. And both of us were in the house after that, just trying to comprehend everything and figure out what our next steps were. And it was surreal. It was just completely surreal. And I didn't get called in home. I decided to go home. And when I went home, I had a house filled with strangers. I had no idea who they were. A lot of them, I guess, were dignitaries and whatever. I could hear my mom in the kitchen in the background, but at that point, I just wanted to do what teenagers do. I wanted to hide. And so I ran into my room and shut the door and hid with my boyfriend at the time. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want to answer any questions. I was just trying to navigate all of these feelings that were flooding in all at once and not understanding why we had so much police presence. Now, we found out later is because, unbeknownst to us, and because it didn't come out till the trial, that we too were targets. And because of that, that's why we had so much police presence protecting us. I didn't go to sleep that night. I peeked my eye out, saw that it was daylight the next day, and wandered out of my room. And I was able to see my brother. I had heard him crying overnight, so I knew he was home and I knew that he was okay physically. But I was able to go and hug him and tell him I loved him and that we were going to get through this. Um, but it wasn't until I'd say about 11 o'clock the next morning. The police presence, because it was 6 days before they caught the men that were involved. This was a planned out assassination of my father in retaliation for him testifying. So we had the police presence in our backyard and our front yard for 6 days. I had bodyguards wherever I went. So I went from a normal teenage life to this, which was completely surreal. And I had all of these emotions that came up. And my mom was very busy with taking care of what she needed to take care of at the time. And so I got kind of pushed aside. Even the media took a couple of days to figure out he had a teenage daughter. And the reason is because the last thing my dad did on this earth was to save my brother's life. He told him to duck down in the truck. So obviously, all of the focus would be on him and my mom, and so be it. I get that. But it left me feeling very unimportant in the scenario of our family. And I was struggling with everything, and I didn't know anything about PTSD back then, but everything that PTSD brings, I was struggling with it. So the not sleeping was not helping either. But the depression, I had anxiety because remember, my dad was my safety net. So now he's gone. And even though I have all these police officers all over, everywhere, I still felt unsafe. Um, and I didn't know how to manage that. I didn't know. It just felt like I was losing it. I felt like I was out of control. And I was terrified to tell anyone because I thought if I say what I'm feeling, somebody is going to throw me in a loony bin and call it a day. Like I'm just not going to say anything. So I didn't. And it was like that for weeks. Um, I had suicidal ideation, although I didn't know what that was. I just knew that I didn't want to feel like that anymore. And I wanted to be with my dad no matter what, however that happened. But again, I was not in the mindset of being able to verbalize that to anyone. So my mom, a few weeks later, it was probably about 3 weeks, my mom came to me and she said that LAPD wanted to pay for some therapy for all three of us. And at the time, I was just existing. I wasn't living. I was literally walking around in a fog. And no matter what direction you pushed me in was the direction I went. And so when my mom volunteered me that I was going to therapy, I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to therapy. But in my teenage mind, I kept thinking, people that go to therapists are crazy. So, um, I thought, all right, well, I'll just go, you know, see what happens. And I saw this gentleman, and in hindsight, now that I know, he was not trauma educated, really, I believe. He was not willing to dip his toes in the weeds, so to speak. He did not even ask me the questions that allow me to be able to open up to everything that I was feeling at the time. In fact, he avoided it. So our conversations were very general. They were very much about my relationship with my mother, my brother, my boyfriend, and school. That was it. And every week I saw him for an entire year, I kept telling myself, today's the day. Today's the day he's gonna say something or do something to make me feel better. And I'd walk out of this office after every session thinking, darn, it didn't happen. And a year into seeing him, he looked at me and he said, Susan, you're a well-rounded young lady. You're going to be fine for the rest of your life, and I don't need to see you anymore. And I literally walked out of his office thinking, okay, I've snapped. I'm crazy. I'm going to have to deal with this for the rest of my life. Even a professional can't help me, so I've got to figure this out. Um, at the time, I felt like I needed to hide. I needed to hide what was going on. I didn't want anybody to I didn't want anybody to see it on the external. So what I did was I created a mask based off of what people told me I was. So when people would say, Susan, you're so brave. Susan, you're so strong. That was my mask. That's what I hid behind. And I kept thinking, if I hide behind this, then no one's going to see the turmoil inside of me. No one's going to think I'm nuts. Nobody is going to think, anything bad of me. And, it caused me to not only that, but it caused me to not be able to recognize when relationships were unhealthy around me, friendships, things like that. Um, I was a big people pleaser. And if somebody even remotely tried to help me with anything, even if it was just something simple, I would always tell in my mind, like, this is my burden, it's not yours. So I always felt like I had to do everything all by myself all the time. And I would mold myself into the person that person needed me to be, including my own mother. Like I just, I went with that because that was easy for me to do. And so that's what I did. Um, I watched my mom turn to alcohol and no blame, no shame. Everybody deals with trauma differently and grief differently. But that was her coping mechanism. And I didn't want to go that route. But what I was doing was not healthy either. So um, I assimilated to living in fight, flight, or freeze. I did what people expected me to do. I didn't have a voice of my own. Um, I didn't know how to advocate for myself. And and that was hard. Um, I ended up marrying the man or the boyfriend. I married him, and we're still together 40 years later, which is crazy to say. Um, and we had two kids. And during that time, I got to a point in my life where I thought if I leave this area, if I leave Southern California and go somewhere where no one knows me, no one knows my story, no one, none of that, or I can feel safe because I always walked looking over my shoulder, um, always waiting for the shoe to drop, so to speak. And so we decided that we were going to move to Colorado. And so we scooped the kids up and we moved to Colorado in 97. And at the time, I was working as a hairdresser. I was working at a salon that was very close to Littleton, Colorado. And I was working on April 20th of 1999. I was doing a client's hair and I took a break and went into the back room. I turned on the TV and up popped the live coverage of the Columbine shootings. And as I was watching the TV, I started to have flashbacks. I saw the school, I saw the police cars, I saw the ambulance, and it all came flooding back. And I didn't understand it. I didn't understand why I was having a panic attack. I didn't understand why I was having all of these emotions come flooding back because remember, I was told I was going to be fine for the rest of my life. And even my colleagues didn't know what was going on because I never told them my story. They had no idea. So I did what I normally did. I just put that emotional mask back on and I went out and I finished my day of clients. Everybody around me was upset, crying, angry, you name it. But I was stoic. And I kept telling myself, this isn't affecting me. I don't have kids that go to that school. I'll be fine tomorrow. Like, I'll feel better tomorrow. It'll be okay. But the minute I walked out the doors to go home, it all came flooding back. Every bit of the emotions that I felt when I was 17. And I started to spiral and I stopped sleeping. And my husband watched this and he's smart and he recognized this was not going to end well for me. I was suicidal and I didn't want to feel like this anymore. But on the other side of that, in my head, I kept saying, you have babies and you can't leave them. So it was a real fight. But when my husband recognized it, he stopped me at the door one day and he said, you have two choices. You either get help today or I'm putting you in a hospital. And I said, okay. I was scared. I didn't know what else to do. So I put up my white flag and I surrendered. And I went and I made an appointment with a physician at first and went in and he put me on antidepressants because that's what they do. And then he handed me a card, a business card, and he said, I want you to make an appointment with this therapist. And I literally laughed in his face. Um, and I said, I tried this 14 years ago and it didn't work. What makes you think it's going to work this time? And he said, honestly, you don't have a choice. And I said, okay. So I did. I made the appointment and I'm glad because she did specialize in trauma, severe trauma, with PTSD was her specialty as well. So as I sat in this woman's office for the first 3 minutes, I felt like this was different. She was finally asking me the questions that I had longed to hear many, many years earlier. That was making me feel like I had a safe space with her and that I was able to be vulnerable with her and tell her everything that I had gone through since I was 17 and what I was currently dealing with. And she listened intently. And when I stopped, she looked at me and said, Susan, everything you've gone through since you were 17 is normal because you have PTSD. And I just kind of looked at her weird because I thought, wait, I'm not in the military and I didn't go to war. So what are you talking about? And she said, no, what you need to understand is that anyone who goes through any type of trauma can experience PTSD. But what you need to understand about it is that PTSD isn't something that just goes away. It's something you learn to manage. And after she said that to me, I thought, oh my gosh, you mean I'm not nuts? You mean I'm not crazy? You mean I can heal from this? And I had so much hope in that very moment. I had so much hope, and I was so grateful for her because I knew I finally found my person, the person that was going to help me and guide me in my healing. And that was the start. That was the start of my healing journey.
Wow, that is just such a impactful story. I've sent my condolences to you about your father. That's
Thank you.
awful to think at 17, which losing your father at any age is difficult, but for a high schooler to lose your father, that I breaks my heart. There were moments here, and I usually don't get emotional. I was getting really emotional from it because it just
Yeah.
how you told the story was so hits right here, really, really hard. Um, did so earlier? I had mentioned that, or you had mentioned that you had wrote a book. Did writing the book kind of give you a sense of therapy and kind of a way to kind of cope with everything that had happened?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In fact, I joke around that I did all of that work with therapists and different modalities for many, many years, which is why I was able to write the book, because I knew that once I wrote that book, I would have to be vulnerable again. I would have to be 100% authentic. And that I knew that feelings and emotions and things would come up for me. And I had the tools to be able to kind of redirect myself so that I didn't start to spiral again. And that's really important when you have PTSD as well. So, yeah, as I started to write the book, even though I did, it's terrifying to put your whole life out there for everyone, and it felt very raw to me and very scary to me. And um, I hesitated at first, but then when I turned 50, I decided that was it. The line was in the sand, and I needed to get this book done. And so I started the process. And in starting the process, um, I knew that in telling my story, I would have to tell other stories as well. And so there was a lot of fear around that. I had a lot of fear and trepidation about it because I thought, okay, in telling my story, I'm going to have to tell my mom's story a bit. And my mom, unfortunately, is a covert narcissist, which I learned through writing the book. Um, I had no idea. And I thought, okay, well, our relationship was already shaky at best. And once the book came out, it could either end what we had left or it could open a conversation. And I had to be okay with either outcome. The other person that I was fearful was my husband because in 40 years, we've gone through a lot together. And my fear was that it was going to raise some old wounds for him. And the third was my safety, because once you've been a target, I thought by putting myself out there, there were still two men that were still incarcerated. And I thought, would there be any retaliation for me coming out and telling the story again? However, the need to write this book initially was because people for many years have had my story in their heads about who I am as a person, how I should feel about things based on their own feelings of how they would handle it if it had happened to them, kind of thing, right? So the perception. And I thought, people need to see who I am authentically, you know. Um, the other thing that I saw a lot was there was still so much pain and anger in the law enforcement community around my dad's death. And I thought that people saw the resiliency side. If they saw that I was healing from this, that in some way it would help them to heal as well. And then I started to really think about, not only law enforcement, but anyone who has gone through any kind of trauma that needed to hear this message of hope, needed to hear my story and see that you can heal from whatever it is that you've gone through. And you can find the resiliency side. So every time those fears welled up in me, and they did often in the beginning, I just kept looking, just picturing those faceless people out there that needed to hear this, that needed to have hope, needed to feel the way I did the day I found my person, my therapist that helped me in the beginning of my healing journey. So that's where the book kind of was born out of.
Kind of going back a little bit about um when they did the trial, did the shooters give a motive of why your dad was targeted, or was it just a random shooting?
No. So the original case was my dad was the lead detective on, and it was a robbery ring. And my dad's the case that he was on was an attempted robbery, or a robbery of a UA theater manager and doing a night drop. And so my dad was the lead detective on that one. Well, the man that was the lead of this robbery ring was the one that actually killed my dad. So it was a planned out assassination. They planned it for months. At one point, my dad was even investigating his own assassination prior to, unbeknownst to him. And so, yeah, there were a lot of people involved. Initially, there were 9 suspects, and 6 of them were tried. We had 2 trials, and 3 of them were convicted. Presently, there's only one that's left in prison for the rest of his life. Um, the man who actually took my dad's life, um, he was found dead last April in 2024 of, they said suicide, but 38 years later, I don't know how that's a thing. Regardless, he's gone. Um, and the third did 32 years, and he was paroled in 2017, which was the catalyst to me becoming very positive that I wanted to write a book at that point. That was the start of the process of, okay, he's out now and I can start going forward and continuing to heal more so. So yeah, I mean it's a very convoluted, I'm still learning, it's been almost 40 years. I'm still learning details about the case because it's just things pop up periodically, that I didn't know and that I'm learning about.
The fact that one of them even got the chance to be on parole is just mind-boggling to me. It's
Yeah.
all of them should have been convicted to life or death sentence, in my opinion, because what
Well,
they've
yeah.
done is
Yeah.
so fucked up. It's
Yeah.
so bullshit
Mm.
how any of them, which I'm glad that the main assassin, the main one, is alive. But every single one of them shits should have been life in prison because
Well,
not
like
one of them
his
should have been able to walk.
the main guy got the death penalty, but in California, they overturned death sentences to life imprisonment. Um, and then his right hand has life imprisonment without parole. So he's the only one that's left right now. The third defendant, who was released, yes, I agree that he manipulated the system in order to get out. Um, but at that point, we had to go back every 3 to 5 years for his parole hearings. And so when you're dealing with that, um, you get to a point where you start to really heal from it. And then the parole hearing comes and it's like it walks you back 20 steps, right? And there were times where I was made to write letters to keep him in prison, but there was a part of me that wanted to move on, and his final parole hearing, I didn't want to write anything. In my mind, I thought if he gets paroled, he gets paroled. And I just hope that he's learned because he was the youngest defendant. I My hope was that he would not do this again. He would not get himself involved with someone and that would destroy someone else's family. Um, Unfortunately, that guy got out and he wrote a book. Um, I didn't want to read it. A friend of mine encouraged me to read it. She actually purchased it, which, because I said I'm not giving him any money. Um, she purchased it, wasn't a lot, but she thought maybe during my writing my book that it might help to give me some answers. And there was a curiosity in me of knowing if he had any remorse, if he took any responsibility. And as I was reading it, which it's an awful book. It's just it's written horribly.
Oh,
Um, it was painful. But there was not one part in that book where he took responsibility. He blamed it all on the main guy and
oh wow.
his being young and a young impressionable man that saw this older guy with all the women and the flash and the cash and hanging out with celebrities and things like that he wanted that lifestyle and so he was willing to do whatever it took to get there. Um, but he never takes responsibility for it. He never says, I'm sorry for what happened, or I'm sorry I made the choices I did, or any of that. So that was unfortunate. But, believe it or not, I had forgiven them many years ago. And the reason I forgave them is because not for them by any means.
Right.
It was my way of taking my power back and saying, you are not going to hurt me anymore. You're not going to keep me from having the life that I want or I deserve. You are not going to hurt me. You're not going to live free, rent free in my head any longer. And that was a big step for me in my healing. Um, because when you've gone through trauma, when you've been, dealt these things, you do feel powerless. You do feel like this has taken over your life every day because you're in pain, because you get triggered, because it sends you back, because all of these things, right? And so for me, it was my way of saying, nope, it's not anymore. Like it's just not. I'm not going to be a victim. I'm a survivor. And this is the mentality that I'm going to take on. And the only thing that I could do because um, the main guy, before he died, when they transferred all of the death sentences to life imprisonment, I knew I had been asked many, many times, do you want to be there when he's put to death? And I said yes. And the reason I said yes is because I wanted to look him in the eye again, because I had already seen him, I already looked him in the eyes when he was being sentenced and in court. And I was going to do it again. And this time I was going to tell him to his face, you didn't win because he is a sociopath. And he felt like he had all the power. And I wanted to tell him at that very, very vulnerable moment in his life that he had no power over me, that he didn't win, and that I've had an amazing life. And, my mom wanted to, she still holds so much hatred, right? It has eaten her life. And that's unfortunate. But for me, it was important for me. And I think a lot of it too is I'm my father's daughter. Um, and I think that that's the road that my dad would have wanted me to take. And it felt like it aligned with who I am. So even though I didn't get that chance, I did write him a letter and I burned it. It was important for me to let that go because that was a disappointment to me that I was not able to see him face to face and tell him those things. But sometimes you don't get that opportunity. And you've got to figure it out, like for your own self. What is it that you can do for your own self that gives you that same feeling of taking your power back? So that's why I decided to write him a letter and then burn it, put it out into the universe. So yeah, I mean it's definitely there's been journeys within my journey.
I don't blame you for going to those parole hearings and then you just finally are like, I can't deal with the writing the letters no more. Because it is hard, so hard to grow from that and try to heal yourself just for it to just come reoccurring back. And re you have to rebuild yourself up and it takes a long time to build in the first place.
Yeah.
It can
And
take some people takes a few days, but others it takes years and decades to finally get back to being healed. And for
yeah,
you having to write those letters, I can only imagine brought so many traumatic things back, and it took forever to heal. Um, you know, what's mind-boggling to me is how the perpetrator or the awful with words, I'm awful with words, but like his assailant or
yeah, yeah.
how
The
he
the,
comes
the
out
defendant, yeah,
with a book.
yeah,
Like, what the? I'm like,
yeah.
and then to get and not take any accountability at all
No,
for being like, I'm sorry for what he's done. What he did was fucked up and everything. It's like, you're such a fucking piece of shit. It's literally,
yeah,
I- it's mind-boggling to me. And then I don't blame you for not buying it and giving him the money. I wouldn't have either. And
yeah,
I would love to have gone like that sentence. I'd been like, oh, uh-huh. I want to tell it right to the fucker's face about this is what you've done to my family. I'll be right in hell for what you've done. You've done, you've fucked yourself all up. And it's like, you're such a huge piece of shit. It's like, you get so much anger out. And I can just tell you how, I know a lot of people are just saying, well, taking something and writing it down and burning it, it's not the same as telling it to someone's face. You'd be surprised.
yeah, it is. It's actually
You
very powerful. Yeah.
you
You
would
wouldn't
be
think that.
surprised.
Yeah, you wouldn't think that. You wouldn't think that. But it is releasing. It is releasing that part. For me, it was the releasing of it and having to release that. Um, and it is powerful. It is very powerful because you're doing it for yourself. Because honestly, the only healing that you're doing is for yourself. It's
Yeah.
not for them. It's not for your therapist. It's not, it's you.
Right.
And so that was the difference for me. And I just felt like that was the only thing that I had control over, right? Was how I felt about it and being able to write everything I've ever wanted to say to him on paper and then just burn it and put it out into the universe. In my mind, I thought, in some sort of way, the universe is going to take care of me one day. And lo and behold, on April 30th of 2024, the universe came a calling and he is no longer on this earth. So, what happened? I don't know. I don't care. For me, it was the first time that I felt like it was over and that I no longer had that. I mean, what little bit I still had of the insecurity around my safety was gone, and I felt it. And I was very grateful to the universe for giving me that gift. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's the book in itself was obviously cathartic for me, but I think that in doing the healing that I've done, it's almost like it's my turn to give back to people who are maybe starting the process or in the middle of the process of healing, don't know where to start in the process of healing. And just showing them that, you can rise above whatever it is that hurt you or whoever hurt you. You can heal from whatever it is that you've gone through.
Well, I have appreciated you so, so much for coming on and sharing your story. I know somewhere, someone that's listening to my show is going to resonate so much with this story because it's sad that, someone's lost their father or even their mother to police violence and has lost someone to a shooting. And I know someone that's dealt with that pain is going to really resonate with this story. And I know that your father would be so proud
No,
of how
thank you.
far you have come. I know he's looking down and he is so proud for of you for fighting and for sharing this story with so many people. I I hope that you continue to find peace and you continue to grow. You seem like you've done very well with it. You just have to tell people it takes time. You just have to wake up and do it day by
It's
day.
not a it's a marathon, it's not a sprint.
Right.
Yeah. And you have to find your person, and um if I can leave anyone any kind of uh words of wisdom, it would be that your healing is your healing, and it's important that you find somebody professionally. I mean, it could be a spiritual healer, it could be like, anyone, as long as they understand your type of trauma, that they're educated in it, that they utilize the modalities for that specific trauma, because we're not all the same. Trauma is not all the same. It's all different, and there's all different modalities and different ways to guide people in their healing. So it's important. And I tell people all the time, you have every right to interview your therapist. Interview them. Make sure that they understand the type of trauma that you've gone through. And make sure that you feel like they're a safe space, just like I had, because this is the most intimate conversations and intimate relationship that you're going to have with someone that isn't like a partner. And you need to have that safe space to be able to be vulnerable, because the only way that you're going to heal is through vulnerability.
Well, I've appreciated you so much. For people
Thanks for
that
having
want
me.
to follow your story and would like to learn more about you on social media, feel free to plug everything and also plug your book as well, and just
Sure.
where people can find it. Just plug everything that you have going on.
Sure, sure. Well, my book, pretty exciting. I just got awarded the 2025 International Impact Award. So it is an award-winning book now. It is on Amazon. It's available in paperback Kindle. And I just got out of a studio and it is now an Audible book. So it's in audio. The name of the book is The Other Side of the Gun: My Journey from Trauma to Resiliency. And I also, if there's anyone out there that maybe they have gone through some therapies and they're still feeling kind of stuck where they're at, and they feel like maybe coaching might be their next step, I do a free 40-minute discovery call for everyone, to see kind of where you're at and if coaching is a good fit for you. And I meet you where you are, wherever you are. And even if you just want to ask questions, or you know you just want to talk to me, you can reach me through my website. It's susansnowspeaks.com. And it's kind of a one-stop shop. It talks about my speaking, it talks about my coaching, and it has information on my book as well. I'm on all the different things. I'm on IG, Susan underscore Snow one. I'm on TikTok for now. Um, and so those are the two main places. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. So, yeah, and if anybody wants to talk to me, I think the best way is to contact me through the website.
And as I always do with all my guests, I will put off her link, social media platforms. I'll put her website, and I'll put a link to her book on Amazon down in my description box, so it's all in one spot for you to easily find. For my show, feel free to follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Lethal Venom Podcast. Facebook and YouTube, it's Noah's Podcast. And feel free to listen to Lethal Venom wherever you get your podcasts from, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Pandora. It's really everywhere. Just feel free to subscribe to it so you'll be notified of new episodes. Susan, thank you so much for sharing your
Thanks for
story
having me.
and taking the time. I think it's so impactful, and I hope someone will find some peace. If they've gone through the same thing, they'll find some peace and knowing that you'll make it on the other end. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Well, until then, I will see you all in the next episode. I hope you all have a great rest of your week or weekend whenever you're listening to it, and I'll catch you on the next episode of Lethal Venom.